Racist man punches black girl, but Messi rushes to save her. How will this story escalate? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The stadium was alive with the energy of thousands of fans, their voices merging into a roaring wave of anticipation. It was a day like no other, a match that had drawn international attention. The teams had taken their positions on the field, and cameras were locked onto every moment of the action. But amidst the spectacle of the game, something entirely unexpected was about to unfold. Sophia, a 12-year-old girl with a love for football that rivaled any professional players, clutched her well-worn ball as she stood near the entrance of the stadium. She had been saving up for months to attend this match, a dream she had never imagined would come true. The moment she stepped into the stands, she was overcome with excitement. Her hero, Lionel Messi, was right there on the field. It was surreal. Her father, Marcus, stood beside her, smiling at his daughter's joy. He had made sacrifices to get these tickets, but seeing her face light up like this made every hardship worth it. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You finally made it, princess," he said with a proud smile. Sophia beamed up at him. "This is the best day of my life, Dad." The match was intense. Every pass, every shot at the goal sent waves of excitement through the crowd. Sophia cheered with all her heart, watching Messi weave his magic on the field. She couldn't contain her excitement and kept bouncing in her seat. During halftime, the stadium buzzed with the chatter of fans discussing the game's highlights. Sophia spotted a security barrier that separated the stands from the field, and her heart pounded with an idea. She turned to her father with pleading eyes. "Dad, can I go closer? Just for a minute? I want to see Messi up close." Marcus hesitated, scanning the field. There were plenty of security guards, and it seemed safe. "Just don't go too far," he said. "And be careful." Sophia nodded eagerly, clutching her ball. She weaved through the crowd until she reached the barrier. She could see the players warming up on the field, and for a moment, she was lost in the magic of it all. But then, everything changed. A man in a dark suit suddenly appeared beside her, his expression twisted with disgust. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. Sophia blinked in confusion. I'm just watching," she stammered. The man scowled. "You don't belong here." Before she could react, he shoved her backward. She stumbled, barely managing to keep her balance. Marcus, still in the stands, saw the commotion and immediately rushed forward, pushing past people to get to his daughter. "Hey! What the hell are you doing?" he shouted. But before Marcus could reach them, the man did something unthinkable. He clenched his fist and swung at Sophia. Time seemed to slow. The people around them gasped in horror. Sophia flinched, bracing herself for the impact. But the punch never landed. A figure moved at lightning speed, stepping in just in time. The man's fist collided with another's arm, strong, steady, unyielding. The crowd gasped. It was Lionel Messi. Messi had been near the sideline when he heard the disturbance. His instincts kicked in before he could think, and he sprinted toward the scene. Without hesitation, he intercepted the blow meant for Sophia. The stadium fell silent. Fans, players, security, all eyes were on the scene unfolding near the field. Messi's jaw tightened as he stared down the man who had tried to hit a child. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded, his voice laced with anger. The man, recognizing Messi, faltered. His arrogance wavered in the face of the global superstar. He stammered. "She's a kid," Messi cut him off. "And you're a coward." Security guards finally rushed in, grabbing the man and pulling him away. The crowd erupted into boos, jeering at the attacker as he was escorted out of the stadium. Marcus reached his daughter, wrapping her in a protective embrace. His heart was pounding. "Sophia, are you okay?" he asked, his voice shaking. Sophia looked up, her eyes wide in disbelief. Messi saved me." Messi knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You all right, Pequeña?" he asked gently. Sofia nodded, still trying to process what had just happened. Yes," she whispered. Messi smiled. "That was a brave thing you did, standing your ground." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Messi shook his head. "No child should ever have to go through that." He looked at Sofia and grinned. "You like football, don't you?" Sofia nodded vigorously. "I love it." Messi glanced at the ball she was still holding, then at the field. He thought for a moment before standing and looking toward the stadium officials. "She's coming with me," he declared. The officials hesitated for a second, then nodded. After all, when Messi spoke, people listened. Messi took Sofia's hand and led her onto the field. The crowd exploded into cheers. Sofia could barely believe what was happening. She was standing in the middle of the stadium, surrounded by thousands of cheering fans. Messi turned to her and handed her the ball. "Want to take a shot?" he asked. Her eyes widened. "Me?" Messi nodded. "Come on. Let's show them what you've got." Sofia's hands trembled as she placed the ball on the grass. Her heart pounded as she took a deep breath. Messi stood beside her, giving her an encouraging nod. She stepped back, focused on the goal, and kicked with all her might. The ball soared through the air and landed perfectly in the net. The stadium erupted. Sofia turned, her face glowing with joy. Messi lifted her up onto his shoulders, and the entire stadium chanted her name. In that moment, she wasn't just a scared girl who had been attacked. She was a champion. And the world had just witnessed the birth of a new star. The energy in the stadium was electric. The crowd was on its feet, chanting Sofia's name, their voices blending into a chorus of celebration. Cameras flashed from every direction, capturing the unbelievable moment of the young girl standing triumphantly on Messi's shoulders. For Sofia, it was surreal. Just minutes ago, she had been humiliated and nearly attacked by a stranger, and now, she was being honored like a champion. Marcus stood on the sidelines, his hands gripping the barrier tightly, his eyes glistening with emotion. He had raised his daughter to be strong, but he had never imagined she would have to endure something like this. And yet, through it all, she had held her head high. His heart swelled with pride and gratitude toward Messi. Messi set Sofia down gently on the grass and knelt in front of her. "That was a perfect shot," he said with a warm smile. "You've got talent." Sofia beamed. "I practice every day," she said excitedly. "I want to be a footballer, just like you." Messi glanced around at the roaring fans and nodded. "You know what? You already are." The stadium announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Sofia, our young champion." The crowd responded with a deafening roar, clapping and cheering as if she had just won the World Cup. Nearby, the referee and match officials huddled together, whispering. The interruption had delayed the game, but no one seemed to care. Even the players on the field had paused their warm-ups to watch, some clapping, others giving Sofia encouraging nods. Messi turned back to the officials. "We should do something for her," he said. One of them, an older man with a knowing smile, nodded. "I think we already are." Moments later, the head coach of Messi's team jogged over to where they stood. He bent down to Sofia's level. "How would you like to be our honorary guest for the second half?" he asked. Sofia's eyes widened. "Me?" "Yes, you. You'll sit with the team on the bench, and if Messi needs a backup, maybe you can step in," he joked. The crowd erupted into laughter and cheers. Sofia turned to her father, seeking permission. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Go on, princess," he said. "This is your moment." Sofia could hardly contain her excitement as she followed Messi to the team's bench. She was handed an official team jacket, which was much too big for her, but she wore it proudly. Sitting among the world's best players, she could barely believe what was happening. Meanwhile, the man who had attacked her was being escorted out of the stadium by security. His face was red with shame as the audience booed him mercilessly. Reporters swarmed the area, eager to capture the disgrace of a man who had dared to harm a child. Social media exploded with footage of the incident, and within minutes, the man's face was all over the internet, condemned by people from every corner of the globe. Back on the field, the second half of the match began. Sophia sat on the bench, watching in awe as Messi moved with grace and precision, weaving through defenders with ease. Every time he had the ball, she felt like she was watching pure magic. Then, something incredible happened. During a break in play, Messi jogged over to the bench and whispered something to the coach. The coach smiled and nodded before turning to Sophia. "Come on, kid," he said. "Messi has an idea." Sophia's heart raced as she followed Messi toward the field. The crowd murmured in anticipation, wondering what was happening. Messi took Sophia's hand and led her to the center of the pitch. Then, he turned to the crowd, holding up his hand for silence. "I want everyone here to know something," he said into a microphone handed to him by a stadium official. "This young girl came here today as a football fan, but she's leaving as a symbol of strength." The crowd erupted into cheers. Messi continued, "No child should ever be treated the way she was. No one should be judged by the color of their skin, by where they come from, or by anything other than the size of their heart." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she listened to his words. Messi placed a hand on her shoulder. "She's got the heart of a champion," he said. "And champions never back down." Then, to everyone's surprise, Messi removed his jersey and handed it to Sophia. It was his official game-worn shirt, something fans would pay thousands for. Sophia took it carefully, her hands trembling. "For me," she whispered. Messi nodded. "For you." The stadium exploded into applause. Sophia hugged the jersey close to her chest, overcome with emotion. She had never imagined that today would turn into something so extraordinary. The referee blew his whistle, signaling for the match to resume. Messi gave Sophia one last encouraging nod before jogging back onto the field. As she returned to the bench, Sophia sat in stunned silence, her father wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "This is just the beginning," Marcus whispered to her. And deep in her heart, Sophia knew he was right. She had come to the stadium as a fan, but she was leaving as an inspiration. As the game continued, Sophia remained on the bench, clutching Messi's jersey like it was the most precious thing in the world. She still couldn't believe everything that had happened. Just hours ago, she had been another face in the crowd, and now, she was sitting among the greatest footballers in the world, being treated like she belonged. Her father, Marcus, sat just behind the bench in the VIP section, watching her closely. He could see the spark in her eyes, the excitement that burned inside of her. He knew this was a moment that would change her forever. The match was intense, with both teams fighting hard for the win. Every time Messi got the ball, the crowd erupted, and Sophia found herself cheering louder than anyone. She felt connected to him in a way she had never felt with any other player. He wasn't just a football star, he was a hero. As the minutes ticked away, Sophia's mind wandered back to what had happened earlier. The man who had attacked her, what had driven him to such hatred? She knew there were people like him in the world, people who judged others by their skin color or their background, but she had never imagined she would experience it so directly. Her fingers tightened around Messi's jersey. He had stood up for her. He had shown the world that people like that man wouldn't win. And for the first time, she realized something important. She wasn't just a victim of racism. She was a fighter. When the final whistle blew, the stadium erupted into cheers. Messi's team had won, and the players ran onto the field, celebrating their victory. But amidst all the excitement, something else was happening. Reporters had gathered along the sidelines, and they were all looking at Sophia. Messi approached her again, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. Sophia hesitated for only a second before taking it. He led her toward the reporters, and as they saw her coming, the cameras started flashing like crazy. A journalist with a microphone stepped forward. "Messi, what made you stop the game earlier to defend this young girl?" Messi glanced down at Sofia, then back at the cameras. "Because she deserved to be defended," he said simply. "No one should be treated that way." Another reporter spoke up. "Do you think this incident will change anything?" Messi nodded. "I hope so. The world needs to see that we won't stand for racism or hatred. Sofia is strong. She proved that today." Sofia looked up at him, her heart swelling. He was speaking about her as if she was someone important, someone who mattered. And for the first time in her life, she truly felt like she did. A reporter turned to her. "Sofia, how do you feel about everything that happened today?" Sofia hesitated. She had never spoken to so many people at once, let alone been on live television. But she took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. "I was scared at first," she admitted. "But then Messi stood up for me, and the crowd stood up for me. And I realized that there are more good people than bad people in the world." The crowd behind her cheered at her words. One last reporter asked, "What do you want to say to other kids who might face situations like this?" Sofia thought about it for a moment. Then she looked straight into the camera and said, "Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong. You do. And if someone tries to bring you down, remember that there are people who will lift you up." Messi smiled down at her. "Well said." The interview ended, and as they walked off the field together, Sofia felt like she had won something much bigger than a football match. She had won confidence. She had won hope. She had won a new future. As Sofia walked off the field, she could feel the energy of the crowd still buzzing behind her. People were chanting her name, waving, and smiling as if she were a superstar. She had never felt so seen before. It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. Messi stayed by her side as they made their way toward the tunnel. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Sofia took a deep breath. "Like I just lived a dream." Messi chuckled. "Good. Because you're just getting started." As they reached the players' exit, Sofia saw her father standing nearby, waiting for her. The moment she saw him, she ran into his arms. Marcus held her tightly, closing his eyes for a moment. "You did amazing, baby girl," he whispered. Sofia pulled back, her eyes wide with excitement. "Messi gave me his jersey. And I got to sit with the team. And the whole stadium cheered for me." The words tumbled out of her mouth in a rush. Marcus laughed. "I saw, princess. I saw it all." Messi smiled at their bond. He extended his hand to Marcus. "She's an incredible girl. You should be very proud." "I am," Marcus said, shaking his hand firmly. "More than I can even put into words." Nearby, a few reporters lingered, still snapping photos. But the security team was already stepping in, guiding them away to give Sofia and her father a moment of peace. Just as they were about to leave the stadium, a voice called out behind them. "Wait!" Sofia turned around to see one of the event organizers jogging toward her. He was holding a clipboard and looked slightly out of breath. "We just talked it over with the club's management," he said, "and we want to invite you to our youth football program." Sofia's mouth dropped open. "Really?" The man nodded. "We have a special training program for young talents, and after what we saw today, we think you'd be a great fit. It's fully covered, your tuition, your equipment, everything." Marcus looked at Sofia, his eyes full of emotion. He knew how much she loved football, how she played every day in the small park near their home, dreaming of moments like these. Sofia's hands tightened around Messi's jersey. She glanced at Messi himself, as if looking for reassurance. He nodded. "You belong there." That was all she needed to hear. "I want to do it," she said. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll make it happen." The organizer smiled. "Perfect. We'll send you all the details, and you can start as soon as next week." Sophia felt like she might burst with excitement. She turned back to Messi. "Thank you," she said, meaning every word. Messi smiled and gave her a small pat on the head. "Thank yourself. You earned this." As they finally left the stadium, Sophia felt like she was stepping into a whole new world. A world where she wasn't just another kid who loved football, she was someone who had been given a real opportunity. And she wasn't going to waste it. That night, when she got home, she laid Messi's jersey carefully on her bed and stared at it for a long time. She thought about everything that had happened, from the terrifying moment when that man had tried to hurt her, to the way the entire stadium had come together to stand up for her. She had learned something important today. People like that man, the ones who saw only color, who judged before they even knew a person, they existed. But so did people like Messi. People who believed in fairness and kindness and lifting others up. And she wanted to be one of those people too. As she drifted off to sleep that night, she clutched the jersey close to her chest, a quiet smile on her face. Because she knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, Sophia woke up earlier than usual, the excitement from the previous day still fresh in her mind. As the sunlight filtered through her window, she turned her head and saw Messi's jersey neatly folded beside her pillow. It wasn't just a jersey anymore, it was a symbol. A reminder of what had happened, of the way an entire stadium had stood behind her, of the way one of the greatest football players in the world had defended her. She sat up, stretching her arms, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a new purpose. Marcus knocked on her door, peeking his head inside. "You're up early," he said with a smile. Sophia grinned. "Couldn't sleep much. Too excited." He stepped into the room, sitting beside her on the bed. "I'm proud of you, Sophia. You handled everything yesterday with so much strength." She looked down at her hands. "I didn't feel strong when it was happening. I was scared." "That's what makes you strong," Marcus said gently. "You felt fear, but you didn't let it define you. You stood up, you faced it, and now, look where you are." Sophia nodded, thinking about his words. It was true. She had faced something terrifying, and yet, here she was, not broken but stronger than ever. That morning, as they had breakfast, Sophia's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages. Friends from school had seen her on the news. People she hadn't talked to in years were suddenly sending her messages, saying how amazing it was that Messi had stood up for her. Even some strangers had reached out, sharing their own experiences with discrimination and thanking her for speaking up. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. Later that day, Sophia and Marcus headed to the football training facility where she was set to meet with the youth team. The moment they arrived, Sophia's eyes widened. The field stretched out before her, perfectly maintained, the grass a deep green under the sunlight. She had played football all her life, but never on a pitch like this. A coach approached them, smiling warmly. "Sophia, welcome. We're really excited to have you here." She smiled back, nerves creeping in. "Thank you for having me." As they walked toward the training area, she spotted a group of kids her age already practicing. Some were juggling the ball, others sprinting drills. She wondered if she would fit in, if they would see her as just another player, or if they would recognize her from the news. Before she could worry too much, the coach clapped his hands. "All right, everyone, gather around. We have a new player joining us today." The kids turned, some of them immediately whispering as they noticed her. She recognized a few faces from school, but most of them were strangers. "This is Sophia," the coach continued. "She's got great potential, and I expect all of you to welcome her the way we do every new teammate." A few of them nodded, and a boy stepped forward, grinning. "Hey, I saw you on TV. That was crazy." Sophia felt her cheeks flush. "Yeah, it was." Another girl spoke up. "Messi gave you his jersey, right? That's legendary." Sophia laughed, realizing they weren't treating her any differently. Instead, they seemed to respect her even more. "All right," the coach said. "Enough talk. Let's get started. The next hour was a blur of movement. Drills, passing exercises, short scrimmages. Sophia pushed herself harder than ever, determined to prove that she wasn't just here because of what had happened, she was here because she belonged. As the practice ended, she felt a sense of accomplishment washing over her. The coach patted her on the back. "You've got skill, Sophia. Keep working hard, and you'll go far." She smiled, feeling more determined than ever. As she and Marcus walked back to the car, he turned to her. "So, how was it?" She beamed. It was perfect. And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. That night, Sophia lay in bed, her body sore from practice, but her mind still buzzing with excitement. She stared up at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day over and over in her head. The way her new teammates had accepted her, the thrill of stepping onto the pitch, the encouragement from the coach, it all felt surreal. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it, half expecting another flood of messages from people who had seen her on the news, but instead, it was a text from an unknown number. "You don't deserve to be there. Stay out of our club." Her stomach twisted. Before she could process the message, another one popped up. "You got in because of pity, not skill. You don't belong here." Sophia sat up, her heart hammering. She stared at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly. She had thought everything was behind her, that the nightmare of being treated unfairly was over. But here it was again, just in a different form. She hesitated before locking her phone and putting it face down on the nightstand. She wasn't going to let this ruin what she had worked so hard for. She had faced worse, and she wasn't going to back down now. The next morning, she didn't tell Marcus about the messages. He had already worried enough about her, and she didn't want to give him another reason to stress. Instead, she put on her training gear and headed to the field as if nothing had happened. But when she arrived, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere. A few of the players were whispering, shooting her glances. She knew immediately whoever had sent those messages wasn't working alone. She took a deep breath and walked onto the field, keeping her chin up. She wasn't going to give them the reaction they wanted. As the practice began, she focused on her movements, blocking out the murmurs, the occasional snide comments. But it wasn't until one of the boys purposely tripped her during a drill that she realized just how serious this was. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of her. A few of the players snickered. The coach blew the whistle, his eyes narrowing. "What the hell was that?" The boy shrugged. "Accident." Sophia pushed herself up, brushing the dirt off her hands. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the anger bubbling in her chest. But she refused to let them see her break. The coach glared at the boy but didn't push the issue further. "All right, back in position. We're running the drill again." Sophia nodded, getting back in line. She wasn't going to let them win. For the rest of practice, she played harder than she ever had. Every pass was sharper, every sprint faster. She didn't let the whispers get to her. She didn't react when someone muttered under their breath as she passed. She just kept pushing, proving with every movement that she belonged there. By the end of the session, she was exhausted but satisfied. As she walked toward the locker rooms, one of the girls who had been quiet the whole time finally spoke up. "You played really well today," she said. Sophia turned, surprised. "Thanks." The girl hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. "Not everyone feels the way they do. Some of us are actually happy you're here." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat. "Really?" The girl nodded. "Yeah. And you should know, Messi coming to your defense? That was huge. Some of them are just jealous." Sophia exhaled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "Thanks for telling me that." The girl gave her a small smile before jogging off. Sophia watched her go, then squared her shoulders. She wasn't going anywhere. That night, Sophia sat in her room, staring at the messages still lingering on her phone screen. She had ignored them during the day, choosing to focus on her training, but now, in the quiet of her room, they felt heavier. She wondered if the people sending them had always harbored this kind of resentment, or if it had only surfaced because Messi had defended her. She thought about deleting them, but something inside her stopped her. No, she wouldn't erase them. Not yet. These words, these cruel attempts to break her, were proof of something bigger. They were proof that she was doing something right, otherwise, no one would have felt threatened enough to try and push her away. With a deep breath, she set her phone aside and went to bed, determined not to let fear dictate her future. The next morning, as she walked onto the training field, she felt a shift in the energy around her. The same players who had whispered behind her back were watching her more closely now. She wasn't sure if they were waiting for her to crumble or if they were starting to see that she wouldn't. Either way, she wasn't going to let them dictate how she carried herself. Today's practice was more intense. The coach had them running drills for nearly an hour before switching into a full scrimmage. Sophia found herself on the same team as the boy who had tripped her the day before. He didn't pass to her once. No matter how open she was, no matter how well positioned, he ignored her. At first, she felt the familiar sting of rejection, but then something clicked. If he wasn't going to include her, she'd make him regret it. The next time the opposing team stole the ball from him, Sophia was already moving before he could react. She cut in front of the attacker, intercepting the ball with perfect precision, and sprinted down the field. She could hear the gasps, the shouts from the sidelines. She didn't stop. Two defenders came at her, but she maneuvered between them effortlessly, her footwork sharp and controlled. She felt free, like the weight of everything outside the field had disappeared. As she reached the goal, she saw an opening and took the shot. The ball soared past the keeper and hit the back of the net. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the sound of applause broke through. Not everyone was clapping. She could still see a few players scowling, but it didn't matter. Because at that moment, she had proven something, not just to them, but to herself. She belonged here. As practice ended, the coach pulled her aside. "You played like you had something to prove today," he said. She nodded, still catching her breath. "I did." He studied her for a moment. "And you did prove it. Keep playing like that, and you'll have a future in this sport." Sophia felt something inside her shift. Hope. Real, tangible hope. As she left the field, one of the boys who had been silent before walked up to her. "That was a sick goal," he admitted, almost grudgingly. Sophia smiled. "Thanks." And just like that, she knew she was turning the tide. She wasn't just the girl Messi had defended anymore. She was Sophia. A footballer. A fighter. And she wasn't backing down.